Hey guys, Dan here with this week's TV news and reviews. Last week we did the HBO Is It Worth It thing for HBO Max. We didn't have any news, but there wasn't a lot that's come out the last couple weeks anyway in terms of what's new on television. So I don't have that much news for you even this week, but I do have one renewal, one cancellation to start off. Cancellation is from Netflix. It is Astronomy Club, The Sketch Show. Now, this is one that I reviewed. I forget when exactly it came out, but I feel like in the fall. And I gave it a pretty average grade. I think it was in like the C plus range. And I didn't realize, I guess probably I did at the time, but I forgot, that Kenya Barris was the sort of orchestrator of that and producer. And he's had that Netflix deal lately. He had the Kenya Barris show, which was, I don't know, reviewed a couple of weeks ago on this show very unfavorably. So that's new on Netflix too. But yeah, I guess the ratings for this sketch show weren't that good, and so they have chosen to cancel that. And then as well, over on the renewal side, another streamer, Disney Plus, has renewed Diary of a Future President. This is one that I reviewed a few months ago, and fairly favorably. I think it was about a B range. And yeah, I thought it was pretty decent, so that will be back for season 2 at some point in 2021. Of course, no dates for anything coming back has really been revealed yet, but I think we can expect that probably in 2021. Speaking of Disney Plus, some other news there. The Simpsons finally is getting their proper aspect ratio with the first 19 seasons. They, of course, were shown in a more square box for the old style TVs and stuff, and didn't actually go digital until 2009, I believe it was. So the first 19 and a half seasons were all shown with the cropped widescreen look. And while that works for many shows, things like The Simpsons, where there's a lot of sight gags, a lot of signs, it just didn't work. And FXX, when they first launched and had the big Simpsons marathon, that was an issue that they were dealing with. And Disney Plus, when they launched, had the same problem, but they released a statement almost immediately saying, look, let us work on this, and in a few months you'll have the proper ratio for these episodes. So we can soon see all the 19 and a half seasons of the original, which really, I think we can all agree the best years of The Simpsons are more towards the beginning and less towards the more recent. I'm actually currently rewatching season 20. There's actually a few episodes I missed along the way. Around season 20 is when I stopped watching it like every single week religiously. So there's a few hit or miss episodes in there that I had not seen before. But it's still a pretty funny show in season 20. It really is. But is it as groundbreaking and laugh a minute as some of the earlier seasons? It of course is not, but I think it's cool that people will be able to see all of the glorious jokes and stuff in The Simpsons with that. Moving over to TBS, Jason Sudeikis is going to have a sort of stay-at-home March Madness style bracket with comedians. It's going to be a show entitled, why didn't I write the name of the show down? I don't know, but it's going to be called something or other. And it's going to be basically a March Madness style bracket where comedians from their homes are going to produce, write, and star in their own little videos every week until it dwindles down to the final two. And some of the names that are going to be appearing on the show are really big names. There's, Gilbert Gottfried is a part of it, Margaret Cho, Natasha Leggero. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. There were maybe like 5 or 6 ones like that were pretty big, like that Jeff Ross from the roasts. And then there's a lot that I have never heard of. So I think it'll be interesting. I would expect somebody more famous, like a Gilbert Gottfried, to sort of sweep the whole thing as opposed to somebody brand new. But you never know. Maybe the new person will have a really unique take on something and just sort of go off that way. But that'll be interesting. That premieres on June 21st on TBS. I'll probably have a review for it for you. So every week there seems to be something with the pandemic and stay at home stuff, and Hollywood still not figuring out when exactly to open. Um, I know some of the studios have talked about going overseas, where they're already opening some things up to like shoot some movies over there. But most of the studios are kind of saying like, well, that's going to be up to the movie producers or the showrunners of the TV shows or whatever. So we'll see. But we could start getting some content from elsewhere than Hollywood itself, coming in the next few months. Batwoman, we talked about a couple of weeks ago how Ruby Rose is out. She has taken leave of the Batwoman program and the character. And originally, I sort of thought, and from what I read, it seemed like they were just going to replace that character altogether and have her be the new thing. But it's going to be a different character that's Batwoman. You know how sometimes, like for example in Spider-Man, you've got, Miles Morales was the new, the animated Spider-Man that they did, but obviously, Peter Parker is the more well-known, and so there's a couple different people that take on the persona. So they've announced that it's going to be a woman named Ryan Wilder is going to take up the Batwoman cape when we return for season 2. Now, 2 of the Ruby Rose episodes were left unfilmed before the shutdown happened. So they got 20 of their 22 episodes. So they're not going to go back to do those. I assume they'll probably weave those storylines into future episodes. But I assume first we have to kind of introduce this new character now at the start of season 2 and give her the reins and everything. I don't know much about her, but she is going to once again be a lesbian. That's sort of the whole Batwoman thing on the CW. So this character will be a lesbian as well. So yeah, we can expect that, I would think as well, 2021. CW has pretty much said that none of their scripted shows that haven't already been filmed are going to wait until probably January to air. So I think that's when we can sort of expect that. And then finally, some news going on with the Black Lives Matter protests and the George Floyd protests and all of that, which if you follow me on any social media, I'm very vocal about. But one thing that has changed in the TV landscape because of that is 2 very, very popular police shows are going to be sort of temporarily shelved. I think these are pretty big franchises that are not going to stay dormant forever, but for the time being, Live PD over on A&E and Cops, which I didn't realize Cops was still in production. I knew that for a while it went to Spike TV, which is now the Paramount Network, but I didn't realize that they were still filming new episodes of Cops. I just thought it was the last 25 years of reruns. They're in their 33rd year on Cops. Fox had it for about 25 years, I think. It was one of their early flagship shows. That and America's Most Wanted were like the Saturday Night Hang, probably in year 2 or 3 of Fox. America's Most Wanted was on from the beginning, but on Sundays. But the Saturday lineup of Cops and Most Wanted, that was a staple on Fox for at least 20 years, I think. But anyway, Cops apparently is still in production. And then Live PD takes people on live calls from the Cops. I forget what town it's in, but every Friday and Saturday night, that has been a cornerstone on A&E for several years, and they run these marathons all the time. Very popular show. So for the time being, for the next couple of weeks, I guess, those shows have been put on hold, put on the shelf, whatever. So yeah, personally, look, I'm all about these protests. I'm all about Black Lives Matter and all of that. Like I said, if you follow me on social media, on my Facebook, like you know that without a doubt. But I do think it's interesting that with Cops being really, really, villainized right now, which, I think in many, many cases they should be. But it's weird to me that a network would decide to shelve a program that makes cops look good or makes cops' jobs look hard, or I don't know. I think it's an odd choice. I'm not really of the like all cops are bad mentality. I think, well, anyway, I don't do politics on my YouTube channel, so I'm not going to get into it. But I certainly think it's an odd choice to sort of take off a show that makes it really obvious that some cops, have a rough, time dealing with victims, and whatever. I don't know. I have mixed emotions about that. Um, it's very interesting to me. But yes, I'm all Black Lives Matter, and I'm all George Floyd protests, and all of that. So, but again, I don't get political on my channel here, so I do that more in my own personal life, I guess. And even then, not much until recently. But um, I just thought that was an odd choice to take those shows off now. In light of everything going on. So let's get into the 6 shows I have for you this week. And there were definitely more that have come out in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, since I did a brand new episode here, since we did HBO Max last week. But these are the 6 that I think sort of A, caught my eye, and B, also kind of tied together with each other, some of them. Because 4 of them are of the game show, reality show type variety. So we'll get to those, but first let's do 2 on Netflix. Space Force is, the obvious one. It is currently the #1 streaming show on Netflix. This had a huge ramp up because it's Steve Carell's return to television. I guess he did the morning show, but this is a comedy. It's his return to comedy television, let's say. And not only that, but Greg Daniels, who was instrumental in getting The Office to the U.S. He is the producer here and created. With Steve Carell. So it's Steve Carell. John Malkovich is also in it as a sort of a co-starring role. And some other names, that especially in the first episode when they sort of trot out some of the other armed forces. We see Jane Lynch and we see Diedrich Bader and a couple other people. So for this one, I did watch the first 2 episodes. And essentially, it's billed as a workplace comedy series, which I guess you could say that, yeah. It's certainly not a home life series, but yeah, it's definitely set at the workplace at the U.S. Armed Forces with Space Force, which is of course I think most of us think is sort of a joke of an idea anyway, that Trump came up with, but this stars Steve Carell as General Mark Naird, who sort of is scoffing at the idea of a space force, and then is told in the same meeting, "Well, you're going to head it up, so that you're going to be in charge of everything." And the chief scientist and sort of rival for Mark is the John Malkovich character, Dr. Adrian Mallory, and then we also have a few other people. Ben Schwartz is the social media director, and of course we know him very well from another Greg Daniels show, Parks and Rec, as John Ralphio, and a few other people as well, both for main and recurring. We do have Fred Willard in what will be his final performances as Steve Carell's father, and it's interesting. It's sort of it's kind of sad to see Fred Willard in the character that they have him, because he's got like dementia, he's got the shakes, and it's like now that the real actor has passed away recently, it just sort of feels a little morbid to sort of laugh at any of that. I also don't know that I find dementia funny like ever. I'm trying to think of some examples, and I'm not sure I have them. So that is was a little bit of a swing and a miss, and I think that is a good sort of metaphor for this whole show. Like I said, I watched 2 episodes, and I'm glad I did, because the first episode was a lot funnier than the second one. I think I might have had a different grade if I only went by the pilot episode. So a lot of these half-hour shows, I try to catch at least the second episode. Of course, it's Netflix, so all 10 are up now for streaming if you want to binge them. But this whole show is sort of like the Fred Willard dementia gag. Like, it's almost like they're not really... the jokes aren't really landing, I think, the way that they want them to. I definitely laughed at certain things. Steve Carell is, always funny playing that sort of. It's not quite a Michael Scott character because he's certainly a lot more intelligent than Michael Scott, or he wouldn't be in this position. But the reason they kind of gave him the position is because he's a little bit of an idiot in that respect, like in his field. So he sort of goes off his gut rather than off of what scientists are telling him. It's obviously sort of like a Trump-ish parody. This guy isn't rich or anything, but I think it's sort of a play on sort of Trump not believing science and Trump not believing X, Y, and Z. He just goes with his gut and he goes with his feelings and he goes with what might make him look good as opposed to what might be good for the country. We see that a lot in episode 2 of Space Force when everybody's telling him can't do this, can't launch, or maybe it was episode 1. You can't launch. It's bad humidity for it. This and that, and he's like, nah, we're launching. I don't care about that. So that's kind of a clear parody, but I don't know. I don't think they are really going far enough. Like they're towing this line on the show where it's like it's not crazy enough to be funny, and it's not funny enough that you sort of make exception for the flaws. I definitely laughed a few times, like I said. But overall, I mean, it's really kind of a mishmash of ideas, and none of them quite get fully realized. And it's a great cast. It's certainly not from lack of trying for the cast. Everybody is doing a good job here. Steve Carell is pretty much always great. I mean, I've really come around even on his dramatic stuff with some of his films the last few years. But of course, as a comedian, I've been a fan of his back since the 90s, since the Dana Carvey show, and then on The Daily Show after that. So, look, I've always loved Steve Carell. He's always funny to me. But he is doing a lot of that same sort of he's doing like Michael Scott isms, I feel like, a little bit. And it's not really stretching his comedy chops the way we've all seen them stretched in other things. I don't think the writing is sharp enough here. I wish it was. I think it reminds me of the early years of The Office and Parks and Recs in some ways. Like, I feel like those early episodes, and look, those are both Greg Daniels shows, so maybe Greg Daniels takes a little bit to get off the ground. I don't know. But in both cases, those first 6 episodes, I mean, The Office had a little more of a template because obviously the UK Office. Parks and Rec just sort of went out on its own, and I think those first 6 episodes are okay, but boy, if that was the whole series, I don't think it ever would have had the legs that it did or the legacy. So for that, I have to give Space Force a pretty middling grade. I think it's got a lot of good ideas, but just none of them are fully realized. But because it's number 1 on Netflix, because it's getting a lot of eyeballs on it, I hope it gets a second season, and I hope it learns from what it's doing wrong in the first season and sort of improves on that. But for now, Space Force for me gets a C+. So we go next to Sweet Magnolias, which is also on Netflix. This came out actually a couple weeks ago, but it is still in their top 10 every day. People are still finding this show and discovering it. It is a soapy romantic drama, I guess I would say. It follows 3 South Carolina women who are all best friends since they were babies, and they basically are going through this these crises in their lives with career and family and romance and all of this. Joanna Garcia Swisher is one of the leads here. Maddie Townsend is who she plays, and I have been a fan of hers for a while. She just kind of pops up different places, but most recently I saw her in the TV show Kevin Probably Saves the World, and I thought she was great in that. I think she's a good actress, and this is the main sort of stuff that she does, this sort of Southern belle, kind of thing. I think she does that really well. And then the 2 other main women are Heather Hadley, who I don't really know very well. She's more, I think, known to the Broadway audience. She played the lead in Aida for a while. she's from Chicago Med, but I don't watch that. And then Brooke Elliott is third, and her I've seen on a few different things. She's been in Drop Dead Diva on Lifetime specifically, but some other things as well. And these are the three gals, and they're all they've all got their own quirks, and they're all making their way. And for example, the Joanna Garcia Swisher character is recently divorced, and she's trying to figure out her way back into the job market. Heather Hadley's character plays this gal who has a spa that is sort of the toast of the town. And then the Brooke Elliott character is a chef and this restaurant owner, and she's trying to really make a name for herself. So with that, there's of course some romances that blossom and all of that. So it's pretty standard, to be honest, but in definitely a down home kind of way. I mean, it reminds me of the movie Sweet Home Alabama, maybe Designing Women, maybe a lot of that sort of real Southern charm type of shows, like Reba, for example, which I think Joanna Garcia Swisher was also on that. They all sort of have this nice Southern charm about them, and it kind of works for this soapy atmosphere, because none of these girls obviously are really villains. They're all just trying to make their way through, and maybe this man will do them dirty, and maybe this man will be good, and maybe this guy will help them get a leg up in the business world, and maybe this gal will help the business thrive, and all of these factors that kind of come together. But I'll tell you what, right now in June of 2020, in a very, very tumultuous time, I think there's worse things than being a nice, charming show. This is part of the Netflix side that, like, I think you can watch with your family. Like, there's no real foul language. Like, they might say a couple of things here or there, but it's very, very like PG to PG-13 rated stuff that you really could sit and watch with your family. It's not quite as tame as like Little House on the Prairie. Obviously, it's got some soap opera elements to it, but it's not nearly as scandalous as like Desperate Housewives or something like that. And look, the acting, some of the acting is not great. Chris Klein, for example, from the American Pie movies, who I really liked for a few years in the 90s. He did American Pie, he did Election. It seemed like maybe his career was going to go somewhere, and then it kind of didn't. Here's, I think, an example why, like, he's trying the Southern accent, and it doesn't go well. He's sort of a recurring character, I think, so I'm maybe harping on the wrong people, but that's sort of the vibe of this show. It's sort of like, well, anything goes. We're too polite to tell Chris Klein his accent is terrible, because we're a polite show. So, but it's got those soap opera elements that I think people are kind of drawn to on a more, light scale. There's, at least in the first episode, there's not, a lot of crazy stuff going on. And a show like this, I don't see reaching for that ring either. Like, I don't see in season 2 they're going to have, some big, sex plot, orgy, murder mystery, like, I don't see this show going in that direction, and I don't think it should. Like, I think for the audience that this show is for, it will work great. I think it's a nice piece of comfort food for people that sort of like that down-home atmosphere. I definitely think the acting could be better for sure, but I think it gets its point across and will hit that target demo right in the feels, as they say. I leave Sweet Magnolias with a B-. So next we're going to talk about 4 really game show, reality show, competition show. There's a bunch of this going on. Every summer is sort of the time for that, because networks are sort of in, they're out of main, lineup kind of stuff. All their main shows for the fall and the spring are done. So what do we get? Well, ABC's been doing it for years with their, Summer of Fun and Games. They have the Match Game and To Tell the Truth and the Celebrity Family Feud, and they've added on to that in the last few years. They've had Press Your Luck Now and Card Sharks and all that, and that does really well for them, and it's a lot of fun. I just wrapped up watching the new Millionaire version with Jimmy Kimmel. It's a lot of fun over there on ABC. So, some of the other networks want to get in on it. NBC has always sort of done that the last 10 or 15 years with things like America's Got Talent. That's typically, big summer show for them. But then in the last few years, they've added things like American Ninja Warrior and World of Dance with Jennifer Lopez. So it's not shocking that other networks want to get in on the action. So I'm going to start sort of with two at once, and that's going to be Ultimate Tag on Fox and then Game On CBS. Both of these are in the same vein of like an athletic type of competition show, much like the American Ninja Warrior type thing. So I will say up front that these shows are not really for me. I am not the target for these shows. If I'm going to watch a competition show, it's going to be either with like trivia questions, or like it's going to be like a game show, or it's going to be more like a talent competition, America's Got Talent kind of thing. I don't really get into the athleticism of game shows and stuff. On occasion it can work. The one that they did with Brooke Burke or Brooke Burns, Dog Eat Dog, back in the day, that was a lot of fun. But basically Ultimate Tag is just what it sounds like. It is the game of tag, played in several different configurations, but all sort of with the same goal of tagging the people. And they have real athletic champions in their fields or whatever, going after the people in the contest and whatever. And it's hosted by JJ, TJ, and Derek Watt of the NFL, which, look, I'll be honest, I don't know who these people are really until recently. I mean, I when JJ Watt hosted SNL was the first time I had ever really even heard of him, and I thought he did an okay job. I thought he did fine. Athletes on SNL are always sort of hit or miss, but I thought he did good. And then, they're all three in a commercial now with their mama for Subway. So, look, I know who they are now, but they are not good hosts. They are so stiff. And I don't know if maybe after the NFL is over, they might want to go into color commentary or something. But if that's the case, I think they really need better personalities, to be honest. They just seem very stiff interviewing some of the athletes on this show. And then the show itself is just, it's very basic, and there's only so much you can do with tag. Like, they're sort of trying to make it like an American Gladiators meets tag kind of thing, where, in one of the competitions, like, they're on this enormous, like, dome, from the ceiling, and people are like hanging off it and tunneling through it and stuff to not get tagged. And it's like, it's interesting. But I was pretty bored with this after about 15 minutes. There's only so much you can really do with the game of tag. So over on CBS with Game On, it's a little bit different. It's still an athletic competition, but it's more of a comedy show as well, certainly, than Ultimate Tag is. But first of all, the host is Keegan-Michael Key, so right there's some comedy. And then basically it's celebrity teams of 3 facing off against each other, and 4 of the people are regulars. So each, Team A is going to have 2 regulars, and Team B has 2 regulars, and then there's a celebrity guest that comes on for each team. So the one I watched was episode 2. I was having trouble finding episode 1, but so the regulars are going to be Venus Williams and Rob Gronkowski. Those are like the heads of their teams. And then each one gets a comedian as well. Bobby Lee is on the one, and Ian Carmel is on the other. And the one I saw, they had Demi Lovato and Ronda Rousey playing as well. Ronda Rousey was on Gronk's team, and Demi was on Venus Williams' team. And so this one is more of it's almost like a variety show of competitions. They do like all these different things, such as like in one they're climbing up, one person's climbing up a pretty thin like ladder to this small little stand, and they have to kind of balance on it and like hold a flag or whatever, while they're being asked trivia questions. And then in another one they're like almost, some of them are like silly competitions almost. And like for example, one of the silly ones is they were doing different grunts for like the tennis, the famous tennis grunt that like Maria Sharapova does. And so they were having everybody on the decimal meter do a grunt while they, hit the tennis racket, and you get points for how loud you were. It's sort of a mix of like athleticism and sort of silliness, I guess. So I don't think either show is necessarily that good. I feel like if you are into the competition athletic aspect of things, I think you would just watch American Ninja Warrior, or some of those. I know every couple of years they come out with new ones. The Rock does one, and for a while I think John Cena was doing one. I think I think the tag Ultimate Tag is too boring because it's too repetitive, and I think the Watt siblings are just too stiff to be good hosts. And then Game On is definitely more fun, but I don't really like Bobby Lee that much. I never found him to be funny, and he's Keegan's buddy from the Mad TV days, so it makes sense he would have him on. But the people there's not like enough competition. It's more silliness and jokes. And like some of the trash talk is funny. Like Demi Lovato actually started doing like some sort of kickboxing or something training because of her admiration for Ronda Rousey. So having them on like as competitors, like I thought that was kind of funny. The little back and forth between the two, but there just isn't enough show there. But it's certainly a lot more fun to watch than Ultimate Tag. So for the two, I leave Ultimate Tag with a D+, and I leave Game On with a C+. Again, these shows aren't necessarily for me anyway, but even if they are, I mean, I think I can get through an episode of American Ninja Warrior and be like, okay, like, this is, like, what they're doing is really cool, like, I could never do anything like that, this is awesome. And, I've seen clips of those shows and stuff, and it's like, it is fun to be involved with, but these shows just really, Game On is too silly, and Ultimate Tag is too boring. So, they need to both find sort of a better mix on each show. So up next we go to Disney Plus again. We already talked about them a few times in the news segment, but we're going to talk about a game show that they just put up called The Big Fib. And talk about a fun host. Yvette Nicole Brown from Community is the host of this show. And it's basically like a kid's version, sort of To Tell the Truth, which is interesting because Yvette Nicole Brown has been on the new version of To Tell the Truth many times. But essentially it's her, and Rhys Darby plays this like robot called Clive. And Rhys Darby, I love whenever he pops up in things. And I thought he was a good choice for this because kids will know him as the dude who says "Welcome to Jumanji" in all the Jumanji movies with Kevin Hart and The Rock. So, I think that was a good choice. Kids already know him and like him. And if they don't know Yvette Nicole Brown, I think they'll like her too. But essentially, it differs a bit from To Tell the Truth. But essentially, it's one kid trying to figure out which of two quote-unquote experts on a subject is lying. And so the one I watched was jellyfish was the main topic. So they had two people that were, jellyfish experts, so to speak. And I kind of knew right away who the fibber was because I've seen her pop up in something. I think it might be an episode of Apple TV's The Helpsters, which is like a Muppet type show for kids. And I think she had like a guest role on that. So I was like, all right, I feel like this is that person. And I never confirmed if it was or not, but, spoiler alert for this particular episode, she was the liar. So I got it. But of course, the kid didn't know that. But he asks them a barrage of questions. Some of them are sort of individual questions for each one. Some of them have to answer the same question. And then there's also like a rapid fire round where he has about 45 seconds to ask as many questions as he can, as he can in that time from his card. I don't know if he had the exact answers on his card or not, but he was asking like fact-based questions, such as, do all jellyfish sting, or, about their backbones, or about their, what they eat, or whatever, specific questions that do have answers that an expert would know. So I don't know if he had those answers in front of him, or if he was just asking the questions. I don't know. But but it's a cute show, and then they have, like, because Disney Plus has no commercials, and in another show they would throw to a commercial and be like, okay, we'll come back and see what's next for these contestants. They do sort of what like John Oliver does on HBO. They sort of have little, like, minute long interstitials that are either trivia based or just sort of little fun or whatever. And I think this is a lot of fun for kids. To tell the truth, is also a very family friendly show, though, so I'm not sure that we needed this version. I mean, you could sit down with your whole family and watch the Anthony Anderson version of To Tell the Truth, which is on ABC, which is owned by Disney. So why they felt the need to do this, I'm not sure. It feels like it might be more suited to Nickelodeon, since they don't already have a show like this. Because To Tell the Truth is pretty family friendly overall, even the new update version. But this is kind of cute for a junior version, essentially, is what it is. And I think it is a little bit more interesting in To Tell the Truth that there's 3 people, and that you sort of are asking them the same type of questions to see how they answer, and if they're just copying off their partner's answer or whatever. But To Tell the Truth is more like, I did something spectacular, or, not so much as this is just my job. So, it differs a little bit that way. But it's fun, for sure. I'm just not sure that while we have To Tell the Truth, the reboot, we needed this. But it's certainly a lot of fun. So I leave the Big Fib with a B+. And then the final show is back over on Fox. It is a reality dating show, which, if you watch my reviews frequently, you know that that's not really my forte. I'm not really into it, but it's okay. I'm watching them for this show. I've seen way more in the last, I would say, 6 months, probably than I have my entire life. I mean, I used to watch, like, Love Connection and stuff, the quick half-hour, dating game shows like Love Connection. What was the other one? Studs, when that was on. The dating game. But as in terms of, like, a long-term, dating prospect shows, I really don't. And some of the ones I've reviewed have not been that way. Like Flirty Dancing is just sort of every episode is new people. But a lot of the ones like Love Is Blind and Too Hot to Handle and what's one of the other recent ones? I skipped Listen to Your Heart Bachelor version, because I didn't really care about that. But this actually sort of has a Bachelor twist anyway. Kristen Davis is the host of it. And, of course, from Sex and the City and, all the little sort of rom-com-y things she's done over the years. But it stars former Bachelor contestant from season 11, Christy Katzman. So, of course I don't know her, but Bachelor fans will know her and maybe, glom onto this show because of that. But essentially, they are trying to find her a man to start a family with. She is, in her late 30s and is like, okay, it's basically now or never. Let's find these guys. So, in that vein, it's going to go on, I guess, 15 episodes or something total. Maybe not that long, I don't know. But, well, there's 15 men, so I don't know, maybe 13 episodes. And it'll go on all summer, pretty much. And we're going to find this woman, a man to have sex with and have a baby with and maybe get married. I don't know. But as a result, we're doing some odd things that a dating show doesn't usually do. For example, they all had to give a sperm sample and get it tested to see if, they have high motility and all of this. I don't know. This show to me feels kind of icky. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I mean, I don't typically like dating shows, but, from a reviewer standpoint, I want to look at, like, okay, how well does it, captivate me? How interesting are the people? How well do the dynamics of the show work? Instead of giving roses at the end, she's sort of like, she has like a flow chart of, who she liked and who she didn't like or whatever, and so she calls a few guys in, and, in this particular episode, she let one of them go, but I think she could let any number of them go each week. So, I don't know, and the guys seem kind of jerky like usual, and I don't know, everybody is perfectly fine, I guess, but these are not my kind of people. Like, there's a specific reason I don't watch shows like this. I mean, I guess it's because it's not really for me, but it's also I don't like everybody is sort of a douche and everybody looks beautiful all the time, and like I don't really get behind that. So this was okay overall. I mean, I didn't hate watching it. Um, and I think the lead contestant, the Christy Kurtzman, she seems nice enough, but they do have like all the bachelor type stuff in here, even though it's not a bachelor show. Like even down to like the guy saying like, oh, can I grab her for a second, to get a few minutes with her, that they parody all the time on SNL. So this show is certainly not highbrow, but if you like dating shows, it may be more up your alley than it was mine. I think it's definitely better than some of the recent ones we've gotten on Netflix, for example. But I think the whole premise is kind of icky. Just sort of saying like, oh, a guy is only worth it for his sperm, and does it really matter if we connect? And obviously she's trying to connect with each one along the way. I get that too. But obviously there's DNA aspects too, because these are all good looking dudes. So just go to a sperm bank and pick a donor out of a hat. Because there's no real mention, at least in the first episode, of actually settling down and getting married to this person. It's all just like, I want to have a baby with him. I want to have a baby with him. How is he going to be as a father? I guess how is he going to be as a father would indicate that she wants him in her life, but like there's no expectation or mention, as far as I remember, of marriage, which I thought was, I don't know, sort of, the whole premise is kind of icky to me. But so because of that, I leave Labor of Love with a C. So nothing really blowing me out of the water this week. Space Force, very disappointing. Space Force is probably the most disappointing show in 2020 so far, because I really, with the pedigree of the creator and the stars, I really had high expectations for it. And here's hoping, that if it gets a season 2, they learn what they missed sort of in season 1. But that's going to do it. I tried to get through these pretty quickly, and I think I did that. So next week we'll have more. I know there's a few that have already premiered, like I said, that I haven't gotten to yet. There's an adult animated show on Apple Plus, I think it is. It's called like Central Park or Central Avenue or something. I definitely want to check that out. Netflix always has new shows out, so I'm sure they have some stuff going on. And we'll see what else is out there. But yeah, I'll be back with a movie review in a couple of days probably. I think this week we're doing all Netflix movies from their recent batch. And then I'll be back next week with more TV reviews. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye.